in the West Country. That's where I want to be when the sun goes down and the moon is rising on a mountain trail. When the moon is pale, listening to mountain streams tinkling through my dreams. Let me wander far underneath the stars, far away from the city lights, underneath the night at close of day, in the West Country. That's where I want to be when the sun goes down and the moon is rising. Trouble on my mind, still I know I'll find tranquility. Something deep inside, something I can't hide, keeps calling me to the West Country. That's where I want to be when the sun goes down and the moon is rising.
Hello and Happy New Year! Look what our mama did this morning. We got one baby. And we got two babies. And you had to pick a nice cold day. You couldn't have them yesterday when it was warm. And now it's time for me to turn the camera off and do checks and selenium shots and feed mama some I'm a new mama stuff. And we got one that's up. And these guys are new. And we got a spotlight for Christmas so I can actually take better videos this year. Woohoo!
Good morning, diners, and welcome to another edition of Collapse Cafe version 2.0. A return of one of our more popular offerings that we did over the years, where I chat with various people who have one relationship or another with collapse, with doom, with permaculture, energy issues. I've talked to many different people of many persuasions over years on the Collapse Cafe. And most recently I spoke with Jason Heppenstall about the shenanigans ongoing with Brexit. And I'm going to be talking with him again this week because that shit is not calming down at all. But we're changing gears for this conversation this morning. I have with me a person who comes more from the production end, if you will, of becoming resilient in society. I'm trying to avoid a lot of words, a lot of buzzwords that get us into trouble, and we'll talk about that as we move along. But she is basically a certifiable expert in what she does, and so from years of experience and so forth. So, without further ado, let me welcome to the Collapse Cafe, and let me get this up and running there. Farmgal. Hi, Farmgal.
Hi.
Yeah.
How are you?
All right. Why don't you start here by introducing yourself to our viewers and listeners and so forth, because I do audio only also with these things, and just tell us, how you got here.
Right. So I go by the handle Farmgal, and I have a small farm that is extremely productive, very focused on closed looping, and so I do everything from gardening to the livestock and a circular plan and I use literally everything I possibly can from the farm and from the surrounding area. I also do a tremendous amount of foraging and hunting and different things like that. So how I got here, so my parents were what was called back to the landers in Alberta, which meant that I've been raised in it.
So that was,
I had my...
That was back to the land movement was the 1970s stuff. I think the Nearings, weren't they part of that business and so forth?
Yes. So in Alberta in particular, in about the 1970s, and I was born in 1972, was the Back to the Lander movement. And it was literally exactly what it sounds like. Everybody kind of went back to farming, they went back to hunting, they went back to living in cabins, that type of thing. So we had, I was raised with no running water. We had a team of horses. We logged with horses. We gardened with horses. Had my first horse when I was very young. Had my first trap line when I was 8, et cetera, et cetera. So for me, although I have continued education, and although I've expanded to the point that my mother actually gave me a great blessing when she said I had actually surpassed her about 10 years ago. But it's literally in my blood. So I've been raised this way my whole life.
And that is a big advantage for anybody who's trying to do the kind of life that you currently do. And many people are interested in trying that now, but don't have that kind of background and experience. So it's it's difficult to make the transition from modern industrial culture and all the ways in which things work now versus the ways they currently work on the farm, and then also how they used to work on the farm. One thing you mentioned here was horses, and I don't know what video I'll go. Yeah, there's a horse, one of your horses in the video right now.
Yep.
The horse aspect is one that a lot of people who are taking up modern back to the land don't pursue. They're still going with the tractor. We have one fellow who's another Canadian who is very much into alternative machinery and powering, and he runs a tractor on wood gas and charcoal, and makes his own and so forth. But I'd like to know a little bit about the horses. How many of them do you have?
I just have 2. I have 2 for a team. Both of them are half draft and half quarter horse, so they're good for riding. They're good for lighter work, as well as put them together, and they can pretty much do anything I need them to do. The thing is like I said, when it's a whole circle, the horses have a limited role. They're for the really big stuff. But in a lot of cases, the pig actually does far more farm work than the horses do, because it's my plow.
Now, I think most people don't think of pigs as work animals. They think of them as food animals, sorts of food and whatnot, but don't usually think of them as draft animals or doing stuff. I did see one of your videos where you had a baby pig that was like digging through the garden and so forth, and helped.
He cleared half an acre that year, so he turned completely wild land at 64 square feet each 2 days, and in it he cleared an entire half acre into planting land, and with no backbreaking work on our part, and lots of yummy pork when he was done and eaten. So yeah, they're powerhouses that way. They're also incredible for creating small wallows. They will actually, their feet are designed so that they'll trample down and they'll create multiple small ponds to help hold the water to your land. So I have an entire area that trails through my pastures that is nothing more than pig ponds that cascade down on slopes. And each of those small ponds, they've kind of blocked up so that the water comes through. Again, cutting down my workload because I didn't have to build a pond, but also creating a much bigger environment. So now I have, not only do I have literally hundreds of toads, which reduces my pest carrying load. But more importantly, I now have habitat for things like the native local turtles and all those kinds of things as well.
Yeah, I did see one of your turtle videos, and I was curious. Do you eat the turtles? Do you have frogs? Do you raise frogs to eat?
I don't raise frogs. We are allowed to hunt and snapping turtles. So the smaller eastern turtles are protected, but we are allowed to take frogs. So there's usually only once a year that there's a frog leg fish fry type thing. But yeah, you can go out on the river and catch frogs and actually have a frog feast. But mainly for turtles, it's snapping turtles is the predominant one that is eaten locally.
How big do they get?
Oh, they can get big.
Yeah.
They're easily 2 feet across.
Yeah. What out of a not a huge one, but a typically sized one? How much meat do you get?
Not a lot. They're not a very productive animal in that way, but it's good eating. It's okay. It's
like
one of those
chicken,
ones
right?
you eat in survival. Like you enjoy it, but you're not going to make a lot of meals out of it. You're going to do it kind of to keep your hand in the game of how do you catch them, how do you process them, how do you eat them, rather than using them as a dominant food source. It's just one more of those extras. And for our area, it's included in the small game tag. So.
Got it.
Yeah.
All right. So that covers a little bit about some of the livestock. Oh, a little more on the horses. So you do keep 2 of them to do this work. What a ballpark estimate? What do you think it costs you per year to keep the horses and do that aspect of it?
They run at least $3,000 a year, and that's each.
That's each.
So
yeah,
that's
it's more,
each.
that's probably more than you spend on a tractor. Although you got maintenance issues and so forth, and fuel.
The difference is they never quit. They never need replacement parts. They never. They'll work in any weather. It doesn't matter. You can't get some started at -40. They'll work. So they're useful that way. That they don't have that off switch that tractors do.
Yeah.
So it's a skill level. I'm not very good at in fixing engines, but I have been around horses my whole life, and so I know how to work with them.
Right, and fix a horse. Can you shoe a horse yourself?
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
No, I can do the trim, but I don't shoe myself. And my horses are barefoot, so they're not shoed.
Oh, okay. Yeah, the mustards up around here say the same thing about their dogs. They don't like using the snow machines because they'll quit. The snow machines will quit, especially we get temperatures like you do there, -20, -30, and you just can't get the damn snow machine to run, but the dogs will always run. Well, not always. There was an issue on dogs quitting in the most recent Iditarod for the guy who was in the lead. And there's all sorts of issues. If you watch my videos on, I covered the Iditarod this year online, and the guy's name is escaping me right now, but he had a lot of issues, and he led the whole race, and then the last 100 miles, his dogs just quit. In my opinion, for good reason, but everybody has an opinion on those things. Anyway,
yeah. I will touch one more thing on the horses really quick. So it used to be that you had to shoe your horses, but now they actually sell boots. So if you're going to do logging and you needed them to have winter logging, early spring, and you needed the grip, we actually sell boots now. So we no longer require a farrier. You can they're fitted, they're measured, and they're actually strapped on. And they only wear them when they need them for work. So I do have boots for when I need them to have that extra grip, but it means that the rest of the time they're barefoot, which is a much healthier situation for the horses' feet themselves.
Yeah, sure, I would imagine so. And it's the same thing for the dogs. They have little booties for the dogs to wear also. especially when they're going over the ice floes and sea ice in the Bering Strait or Bering Sea and that sort of business. So, modern equipment can be helpful in those ways. And, I'm very much that, you don't have to be slavishly primitive to be transitioning yourself to a more sustainable lifestyle. Then on the, one more on the draft animals. Do you have any other animals you use for draft? Like a lot of people have goat carts and things like that.
I use my largest male ram is also, his name is Drambuie, and yes, I will use the sheep. And if I had to do small carts, sheep are excellent that way. I'm kind of a bit unusual. Most people like goats more. I have had milking goats. I have had cows. It's not like I haven't had them or had experience with them. But my ideal flock herd animal for homesteading is sheep. I consider if I had to get rid of everybody else, sheep would be the ones I'd keep. And so I have a lot of reasons why over 15 years of working with the different livestock, I've narrowed it down that sheep are the ones that I would keep.
Now, do you do the shearing on them? Or do you not bother shearing?
Half of them are sheared, and the other half are hair sheep, so they have no wool, which works really well because they grow wool in the winter. They shed the wool, so I can still use it for insulation purposes and gardening purposes, etc. So I still have that access to it. But at the same time, they completely shed out to being a hair sheep in the summertime in the heat, so they don't have the same heat stroke problems. They don't have the same fly strike problems on their tails and different things like that.
I didn't know that there were varieties of sheep that work that way. And the only familiarity I have with sheep is from when I lived down in Oz. I went to a few sheep farms over the years, or ranches, I guess they're called. And of course, I love lamb chops and rack of lamb.
They're very tasty.
Yeah, that is one of my favorite meats to cook up.
I
actually
consider my sheep to be part of my heritage because my great-great-grandmother, who came from Norway, ran and owned one of the largest sheep ranches in southern Alberta, down by Lomond area. They ran 10,000 head. And she was very progressive in her day. She actually brought up an entire family that ran next to the ranch with her because she was actually in charge as the lady. So back in the day, that was unusual to have a woman in charge of a massive ranch rather than men. Mm-hmm. And so anyway, yeah, it's a tie back for the family.
Well, I'm sure that's, you definitely inherited some genes from that portion of the family. So... let's, since we got to lamb chops and sheep, let's get to the topic of food. And before we get on that, I have something to say to the diners and all the people who watch the Collapse Cafe and the Morning Wake Up Call and so forth. We're getting great viewership on the cafes and on the Morning Wake Up Call, but on my cooking show, The Cooking Zone, it's lagging behind. You guys aren't watching The Cooking Zone. And, the recipes are really good. And we talk collapse while I cook. And, you might learn some new techniques. And you might get a laugh out of watching a cripple try to use a knife like he used to. So, come and watch The Cooking Zone, okay? Okay, that's enough of my plugging. You obviously get a lot of your meats and so forth. Hang on. We just lost the camera. All right, so let's talk food here a little bit. And let's start on the food level with... I think what most people are a little more comfortable with, which is the veggies and the vegans, and all that, growing stuff out of the ground and whatnot. What sort of stuff do you grow? And in what quantities, varieties, and so forth? Do you do your own seeds and so forth?
Yes.
Give us some background there.
I have a permaculture leaning, so I don't like bare ground. My gardens do not look like neat little rows. I like to garden in plain view that most people would think is hidden gardening in a lot of cases, because if you don't walk among it and know what you're looking for, in a lot of cases you'll just think I have an overgrown meadow with some tree rows without understanding just how much is actually growing in there. I even have some gardens in an area across the way that is in forest, so I've actually practiced and continue to practice growing in the edges, as they say. But I do, I produce about 6,000 human consumption pounds, and then I have about 4,000 to 6,000 that I grow for the livestock end of the fodder, and that doesn't include the foraging stuff. That's the actual production end. So I grow getting pretty close to growing all of our own fruit, and all the greens and the veggies and the different things like that. What can't I grow? Well, of course I can't grow. I'm in the northern climate. I'm zone 5, so I'm obviously not growing anything like coffee, banana, oranges, or anything like that. I'm on the northern end of things. However, having said that, they've really pushed the envelope in Canada, and in a lot of cases, things have come in from Russia and Ukraine and those type of areas where we grow. Like I'm growing rice because I actually got my hands on Mongolian rice, and it's dryland rice that doesn't need to be flooded. So I'm on their 3rd year locally. There's a group of women that are collectively growing rice so that we won't have to rely on the store to actually have our own rice. Barley is a good one as well. That's a big one locally. Again, winter climatized, again, coming from Russia. As for seeds, yes, I save my own seeds. And I'm actually on my 4th year of growing for a Canadian heritage seed house, where I grow 2 to 3 different kinds of seeds that I grow in volume, and then I ship them back to them. They pay me, and that's distributed all across North America. So my seeds are growing in people's gardens all over.
Oh, well, that's real expertise then on a professional level. And, that does touch on another topic. Let me go off on a tangent here. Small farms...
Oh, there we go.
What happened?
The connection got lost for a second.
Oh, well, you're back. Minor glitches like that, or if that's all we get, we'll count ourselves lucky. No, I lost my train of thought. So the economics of small farms is one of the tough things for people to handle. Most small farms have a real tough time making a go of it on the financial level. Where do you fit in that? Do you feel like you break even overall, or it costs you a decent amount of money, or what? Or you make money?
It's an interesting one. So first of all, I have to completely own up that my husband works full-time as an off-farm income that pays for the farm. And so we're not trying to make a living off the farm. That's the first thing I have to own up to right away. Having said that, because I grow predominantly all of our own vegetables, fruits, and I pretty much grow 100% of our meats unless it's wild harvested, and the fish is locally fished, but otherwise everything is on the farm. I've done the hard numbers. The farm produces enough that if you had to buy it off the farm, it's about $30,000. So there's nothing wrong with cutting your bills down by $30,000 a year.
No.
And that's where we sit. So and I do some small farm gates stuff. But again, I'm trying to balance the books rather than make money. So I sell enough lamb that it pays for my sheep. So I'm not trying to make money on it, but it costs me nothing. I sell farm eggs for the same thing. It pays for the feed for the chickens, and then it costs me nothing to have the chickens for us to be eating them. So that's economic. Same thing with the plants.
Where do you sell? Where do you sell the stuff? Do you through a cooperative, through farmers markets, or?
No, I keep my costs low. I sell everything off my farm. So it's word of mouth, and I've had buyers that are 10 years plus. They make those beautiful lamb chops, and then their mother wants to buy lamb, and it just spreads that way. So I have a waiting list of regulars, and I literally call them up once a year, so no extra work on my part, and go, this is what I have available, buy it whole. I don't sell anything part. So you get a whole lamb, and you pick it up one time, and then I'm done with the customers. And same thing with the farm eggs. They just come, pick them up, and they're done.
Uh-huh.
So my predominant one is eggs are a little more regular, of course, and same thing, plants are springtime. So, but it's usually one day. I pick one day, everybody comes on the same day, and they're done. So I don't do the traveling. They have to do all the costs of that travel.
Well, you got to develop a reputation, and that takes time to develop it. But that is the way to go. I would say the best way to go. The other way, I mean, if you're in close enough proximity to big cities, is to sell your stuff to fine restaurants that are interested in particular types of meat or particular ways in which it's grown, and so forth. I know when I was at Capsuta Freres, we sourced a lot of our meats from an upstate New York farm, and got them directly, and I had to do a lot of the butchering, which was something I was good at. So I don't mind butchering an animal. And on that note, in our prior conversation, you mentioned that is one of the problems that a lot of newbies have who come into the field of wanting to live on the farm, and I'm trying to avoid the word prepper here.
No, it's okay.
But and become preppers and collapsinics and all the other terminology that we use to designate people who are trying to get ready for an oncoming collapse of industrial civilization. What have you found with in your travels with people, and their ability to butcher animals and handle that?
Well, I'm going to divide it into two areas, just really quickly. So the one thing that you find is, because I do teach homesteading classes and preservation classes and food classes and that type of thing locally, I do get a lot of exposure to people who are involved in trying to be more self-sufficient that are still in town or on the edges of town. And in that would include backyard chickens, production, different things like those. For those people, they really struggle. They don't understand that there's small animal death. They'll get 3 birds, and then they get very upset if they don't all survive, and they don't understand that neonatal losses last up to 12 weeks. I mean, most people don't understand. That's one of the biggest things I find, is that they think every birth is going to be perfect, every newborn is going to be perfect, and that is the absolute nonsense. The statistical average is that you will lose 25% in that neonatal. Now that's from stillborn to having problems and complications in your first days, all the way up to that 12-week mark. I'm very lucky that in some of my breeding programs I'm as low as 5%, and on average I'm about 12%. So I'm far below statistical average. But when you say to people, if you have 4 animals and 25% of your offspring are going to die, they gasp and they go, that can't be right. And then a lot of them really struggle with that learning that curve. You see a lot of people quit when that curve really hits home, and equally you see a lot of people spend way too much time, money, and effort trying to save the ones that aren't savable. That's a huge thing in the new preppers, survivalists, whatever. Well, not survivalists; they're a little tougher. But the more self-sustaining ones, they really struggle with that. So that is worth pointing out, that they need to get that grasp and that information out there, that it's not perfect, and they want it to be, and it can't be. But then I lost my train of thought.
I do that all the time. Don't worry about it.
Okay. Well, the second one was that a lot of cases they will raise them up, but then they won't butcher them. So what they actually do is they give them to me or people like me. There is a lot of us who I get calls every single year that said, I raised up the chickens and it's a beautiful rooster and I can't butcher him. Will you take him? You can eat him, but I can't do it. So it gets me a lot of free meat that's been raised on organic feed and different things like that. But it also gives me that real opinion of looking out and going, if you really had to, they're choosing not to learn those skills, and that's to their own detriment, right? They've put the time, the money, and investment in those animals, and then they're not doing it. And that goes, I've been gifted by goats, sheep, ducks, turkeys, chickens, mostly roosters. Roosters are a big one. And rabbits. That's another one. People will buy the rabbits to get meat rabbits and then discover they can't butcher them, and they give them away because they literally don't want to keep them, but they can't eat them. But they say that even when I talk to farmers, traditional farmers now, nobody butchers anymore. It's this fine line within, and I am going to use that word, within that prepping, self-sufficient community. It's only there do you find that people still butcher. Even when you talk to hunters, so many hunters now don't butcher. Locally, there's 4 different companies that you just take your wild game to, you drop it off, and they give you your box with your little tiny brown wrap paper. And so butchering is becoming.
Oh, they vacuum seal it at Matanuska Meats over here. comes back to you very nice.
Very nice.
But you pay you pay for it.
And the thing that they lose, and this is a really important thing for people who want self-sufficiency, the thing that they lose when they have that, not only are they not getting the skills, but they lose all the offcuts. So you're not getting your bones back. You're not getting the offal, which you should learn how to do it. Some of the things you'll find on my blog, and you'll notice, is I have Hungarian duck blood soup. So how to utilize blood, and it doesn't just have to be blood sausage. There's other ways to use it. There's recipes where you can utilize young lung, and it actually mimics like pasta in the dish. I spent an entire year learning how to take everything that most people throw away and how to cook with it and how to make food that my husband would eat, and that was the key. He said that if he could tell what it was, that he didn't want to eat it. So I had to literally create recipes and figure out textures, which you as a chef will understand, to mimic different things in the recipes so that people would eat them.
That is a talent. And that's,
if you take it to the butcher, you don't get any of that.
I've got to say that I have a little experience with working with those particular parts, livers and hearts and so forth. Even brains I've worked with, but not lungs. Never tried to do anything with that particular part of the animal. Or human in the future if the zombies come out. I don't want to go into cannibalism. Let's try to stay off that.
No, let's not.
Let's not go there. Okay. So yeah. Now that is a lot of interesting types of recipes. Some of which I'm going to have to investigate your channel a little bit more and see what's on there. Maybe I'll try something. Although I don't know. Maybe over at Matanuska Meats I could get some odd parts that aren't normally sold. I'll have to talk to Gustav. It's run by a German guy. He does lessons in charcuterie and food preservation and so forth. And that's another topic of food that isn't talked about much. And I did see on your blog that you have a whole section or page devoted to preservation. What sort of methods do you use on the farm? How many freezers do you have? So forth.
Three. I have 3, although I do work to turn them off in sequence. I have, so first of all, I'm open to all forms of preservation. And I do some that are not, when I teach classes, I teach people the absolute correct way to do it. But here on the farm, I get to play. And so I do everything, try a lot of old-fashioned experiments, and I've had some food ruined, and I've had some good learning curves. But I do canning, drying, salt preserving, fermenting.
Conversion, salt conversion.
Sorry?
No, I was making a joke. Don't worry about it. You were having trouble
well,
with.
I actually
You said you were having trouble with.
I know that keeps 1,000 pounds of salt on hand.
Yeah. No, you're having trouble with the word preserve, so it came out kind of like salt perversion, you know.
Ah,
So
okay.
okay.
Gotcha.
Now I know what the fetish is over there. Yeah. So.
No, salt is something that I can't get on the farm. So that's a really good tip that I give a lot of people. Right now you can go buy 40 pounds of pure salt in a bag that you can put away very easily, and you could put up 500 pounds of salt. But where I live, there's no way for me to get salt. And when you look at history, salt has been a commodity that we take that's had great value, that we take just kind of like, oh yeah, salt. Mm-hmm. But really, so many of the fermentations require salt to start it properly. And of course, if you're butchering and you had to butcher at the wrong time and you have heat involved, just even a skim of salt will make such a difference to your meat to seal that skin up so that you can actually then hang it and smoke it and dry it and all the other different things.
Right. And that's why, some kind of trading networks, mostly, salt either comes from salt mines or from the ocean, in various ways. So, so some sort of trading networks with places like that, hopefully, will continue to exist as we move forward through the various stages and phases of the spin down, which I don't think either one of us expects to happen, all at once, immediate. Boom, we're back to 1700 or 1600 again.
No,
it's going to be a kind of a stage-wise, stepwise ladder, moving backwards as time goes by. How fast that transition is remains an open question. It's one of the things we talk about all the time on the diner, and it remains a constant source of controversy, as to what the actual end game is. Are we going extinct, or will we become hunter-gatherers again? Will we be able to make a subsistence farm style of living work? Will slavery return and that type of agriculture? So there's many questions that are corollaries to these questions that we concern ourselves with on the diner. Unlike your blog, where we look at all things that are impacting on the collapsed environment rather than sort of focusing on the farm and the food and all the rest of that. Which is why it's a pleasure for me to talk to someone who is genuine practitioner of all this stuff and knows about it in detail. I don't find too many people like that. Although on the diner now we do have somebody C5, Category 5, who is another hoser from the Great White North over in Nova Scotia, and then we have another guy, NF Nearingsfald, who is I think he's closer to Toronto. I'm not precisely sure where his location is. I'm pretty sure that's where it is. He is practicing a lot of this stuff. So we do have that discussion going on periodically on the diner too. All right. In moving on, let's cover one more topic for today. We've actually talked pretty long already, and I'm probably going to have to cut this one up into a couple of parts. Is firearms, which people are concerned with as we move forward in the future, what the laws are regarding them, How much control do we need over them? How much control should the government have? And training, and, all those aspects are important as far as the guns are concerned. So, what have you learned in your travels so far about firearms and your style of living?
Well, I was raised in a very pro-gun family. So because my grandfather had a farm in the bush, and my uncles ran trap lines, and my parents were backlanders, I was raised with firearms in the house. I had my first .22 for my own hunting for small livestock, or small stock actually, by the time I was 8. I had my first 30-06 by the time I was 12. So to me, I was literally at the age of 6 out helping my dad make bullets, and reloads. So, and my parents were involved in rendezvousing, which is the 1800 style black powder shooting. So I was involved in all of that as well as I was raised up. Having said that, once I got older, I met my husband. We lived in NWT and then in Nunavut. And you don't go to the land. You don't go to the camps without being armed. So I am very pro rifle, and in certain situations I am pro hand gun as well, because there's times where you're just not going to get that rifle out, and you need to have that on you. Having said that, I'm not pro assault rifle.
Not pro assault.
I don't think anybody needs military grade weaponry on an average basis. So for me, I'm 110%. Yes, you need your rifles. You need it for all kinds of hunting purposes. You need it for different things. But I'm not so keen on the other one. But in Canada, they're trying to take away even handguns now. They're starting to push for that. We're licensed. We've been licensed for quite a while. So it's really not difficult. As long as you have a clean record and different things, you can go get your licensing.
Do you have concealed carry up there? Do you have concealed carry as well as open carry for your firearms?
You can apply for it if you will need special circumstances to get it. It is not as easy as you can get down in the States, that's for sure, but it is possible to get. You also have grandfathering in, which a lot of people don't talk about here in Canada. So when they first registered, you could register a lot of guns that are now prohibited. And they're grandfathered in, and you have the rights to them, and they're passable through family lines. So you can pass it down directly to your children and directly to your grandchildren, and down the line it goes. So while you can no longer go buy them, there are a lot of them actually in gun cabinets all over the country. It's just that they're grandfathered in rather than being bought new. The other thing in Canada that most people don't realize is that we have a lot of weapons. There is this image that we are pacifist in a way, and we're not. That's just not the case. The reality is we are almost equal for the people who have the registrations. We almost are even to the United States in how many guns and rifles and handguns, if you have that.
I would imagine on a percentage basis, because your population is much smaller.
Yeah, but we have, like, if you take the population and you count your guys' guns, and then you take our population, right, and then you count the guns, we're pretty much even.
Right, percentage, yeah, 5%.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not surprised about that. I mean, Canada was settled by the same, trappers, hunters, and so forth, that the fascist states of America was settled by, killed off all the natives, just like they killed off all the natives down here to take over the land. Not a whole lot of difference in the use of firearms from one country to the other. And then there's some interesting details I've read about Canadians in the RCMP and their treatment of the natives, which was very revealing to me. I read that a while back. But that's more than I want to go into now. All right.
Actually, there's one thing about the firearms that I would like to mention that I do think is interesting in Canada. I don't know if this is happening in the States. You'd have to ask the right person. But one of the things that's happening here in Canada that is interesting is we have, in the last 10 years, seen a massive surge in women that are joining the gun ranges, that are getting their licensing, that are getting their hunting licenses. We are the fastest growing gun owner demographic in Canada is females. And I think that's fascinating.
Let me before we get off and sign off the air here. One more question on the weapons. But what about primitive weapons? Because eventually we're not going to be able to get the ammo for the guns for one reason or another. In the long term, we won't be able to get it because the black powder, all that stuff is very energy intensive stuff, and actually the manufacture of it takes energy, and a lot of the stuff that has to be mined takes energy, and so forth and so on. So that's not going to be available in perpetuity. And then on the economic level, the sale of it and so forth would be very difficult. So do you deal much with primitive weapons? That's a big passion of mine. Bows, crossbows, atlatls, sling, that sort of thing.
Personally, ourselves, yes, we actually have crossbows and bow and arrow. Within my own social circle, we have a lot of people who have bow skills as well. But we also plan and have the equipment to be able to do trap lines, which are fundamentally more efficient in a lot of ways when it comes to small game. If you're in a situation where you're going to be hunting, it's easier to run a trap line than it is to actually get out there and stay out there, because we forget that man hours are really, really important. And so you want to be able to work in your garden, and you want to be able to do all those kinds of things and have that happening without you having to be there. So to me, I think that skill level is pretty important for if you're talking about the primitive, your trap lines. And I actually have a cousin who runs a full trap line up in the Yukon. He's very proficient, and he's won awards in Canada for his furs. So, and like I said, I had an uncle that ran a trap line in northern Alberta for years and years and years, like 40 years. And so it's, again, that aspect is in, we all know how to tan hides. We all know how to work those.
All right. Well, I learned a lot in this conversation, and, we may be able to do another one at a future date. I will say that I got a lot of editing to do on this one, but it'll be fun. And I can't tell you guys out there precisely when I'm going to get this one up, because I have another one that's the pressing problem of Brexit, that I have another conversation with some Brits to do on that one. So, a lot of video work and a lot of stuff in the can, but it'll get up eventually, and that's when you'll actually see me saying this. I forget that I'm not running live also. I used to do these live. Alright, doomers and klapsniks and permaculturists and survivalists and whatever the fuck you call yourself, that's all the doom. This time until next time, here on the Collapse Cafe of the Doomstead Diner.
Green Acres is the place to be. Farm living is the life for me. Land spreading out lots of far and wide. Keep Manhattan, just give me that countryside.
New York is where I'd rather stay. I get allergic smelling hay. I just adore a penthouse view. Darling, I love you, but give me Park Avenue.
The chores,
The stores,
fresh air.
Times Square.
You are my wife.
Goodbye, city life.
Green Acres, we are there.